My name is Ray Davidson. I am the project leader, Grand High Exalted Poobah for the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps. And I am very happy to be here because I wasn't sure that CircleCityCon was going to happen. Did anybody, how many of you planned to come when it was like earlier? Did anybody come in May? Anybody show up? I submitted my talk and then didn't hear anything. And this is not a slam at staff or anything like that. I know it was terrible, but I'm glad to be here. I didn't think it was going to happen. So I am from Michigan. Michigan is one of the other states in FEMA Region 5. Anybody here not from Indiana? Okay. Where are you from? Ohio. Okay, Ohio has one of these. But if you didn't know, I'll tell you about it. Who else is from someplace besides Indiana? Okay, to my knowledge, Illinois does not. So I'm brainwashing you and sending you off to be an embedded spy in Illinois. How about you, sir? Okay, where in Illinois? Okay, so you're actually pretty close to Michigan. You should come to GERCON. And you, who else is not? Yeah. Okay. You look familiar. Probably. Yeah, okay. And you, sir, in the back? New Jersey. Do you know him? Right, okay. Isn't that... Okay, there's a New Jersey guy I just saw in the news, but he's in Pennsylvania now. He's running for Pennsylvania office. Yes, I knew it, right. I know, you can see Russia from there. Right, so I'm going to talk to you about the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps, but I'm going to spend a few minutes, because the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps is, we get some publicity, and people think it is a thing, and I love the positive publicity. People think we're cooler than we are. I know this because I just went over to Wisconsin. Wisconsin also has a Cyber Civilian Corps, and I thought they were really, really cool, and then they started telling me about all the problems they have. So, I mean, it's startup problems. So I'll tell you some of the adventure we have. I love this job. So I'm going to tell you why I love the job. I'm going to try and tell you what we're trying to do with the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps. But I want to give you a caveat here. This is from Halvar Flake. If you've been around for a while, you know the name Halvar Flake. I forget how I knew his name from my early cybersecurity training. But he says, and this happens all the time, I get calls from people that say, how should I start my cybersecurity career? You know, what should I be doing? And in fact, I've got a guy from Purdue that I hoped would be here. I'm going to talk to you. But this is the thing. When I started cybersecurity wasn't even a thing. Like, cyber wasn't a thing. Computers were just starting to come into being. And the whole way that you got into it was being interested in what's in the gaps, like not the official subject. So if you're thinking of going to school in computer science because you want to get into computer security, by all means, listen to what I have to say, but I do not have a roadmap. And I think anybody that tells you a roadmap is probably wrong, because if you're going to get started for something that's going to come to fruition in 5 or 10 years, the world is going to change. I mean, you only have to think about what's happened in the past 2 years. So, and I do have to quibble about, let's see if that's not working. Sometimes I can make this be a highlight. But that last line, having gone mainstream, I resent that. But, you know, it's what he said, so I have to use the quote. So, where did so what is one way of getting started? I started my career in cybersecurity as a chemical engineer. I was in graduate school at Purdue in West Lafayette, and I think it was about 1982 when, like, as a graduate student, you're on campus all the time. Undergraduates go home or they go to co-ops or whatever, but in the summer, it's really nice because it's quiet. And so all the undergraduates left, and these shroud terminals started appearing all over campus. They were beige, and they had green writing, 3270 type terminals. And it turned out they were installing a network of faxes. And the undergraduates came back, and they got training. We were graduate students. We didn't. Nobody thought we were very important. If you're going to sing, I'm going to save it for the question period, okay? Okay, well, it's all right. We do have the kumbaya at the end, and you'll recognize why. But so I was at Purdue, the internet appeared, and at the time it appeared, I'd already done my master's degree, and for those of you that don't or aren't in graduate school, and there were these things called typewriters back in the old days, and if you got a graduate degree, you had to get somebody to type your paper on like 80% cotton, some special expensive paper, and it was like $1.50 a page for them to type, and you didn't have to pay if they had to backspace or anything, because they had whiteout back then. Do not use whiteout on your screens. It doesn't work on computers. But that was the old way of doing things. And in between my master's and my PhD, that was when they installed the vaccines. And the one thing that I found out was that it would do typesetting. It would do nroff, troff, for those of you that did Unix. This was Unix 4.2, BSD, before anything. So we learned about computers, and at that time, cybersecurity was remembering to lock your terminal before you went to the bathroom, because one of your fellow graduate students would get in and put, well, I would call it obscene, but ASCII art, you know, it's not really high resolution enough to be obscene, but you'd come back and there would be all kinds of things that would go in your .profile when you log back on the computer. That was cybersecurity back then. So I got out, I started working for a pharmaceutical company. Anybody happen to know what is located at 3401 Hillview Avenue, Palo Alto, California? 30 years ago, it was a company called Syntex. You ever taken a drug called naproxen? It's a painkiller, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. That was their big thing after they invented the sexual revolution. Syntex was one of the first providers of oral contraceptives. So it was on Hillview Avenue, Palo Alto, great place to be, across the street from the Xerox Palo Alto Research Center. Anybody know what that is? Xerox PARC is where Windows mouse, the Windows interface mouse pointer WIMP was invented. That's where Steve Jobs stole the whole Macintosh operating system. Steve Jobs was around the corner at Next when I was at Syntex. Syntex went out of business because they did not reproduce naproxen, and currently, 3401 Hillview Avenue is the headquarters of VMware. It's pretty cool. So I got out of Syntex. It was too expensive to live there, but it was in Silicon Valley, and my first computer was a Macintosh. You know, like not Unix, not Windows, really weird. So I left the West Coast, too expensive, moved to the Midwest, Kalamazoo, Michigan. Pretty different from San Francisco. I worked for a pharmaceutical company, Pfizer, which you've probably all know heard of. I went to work for Upjohn. I went to work as a pharmaceutical scientist. I worked for animal health, created a formulation for mastitis, which is an infection of udders in cows, and it keeps you from being able to drink milk, because if a cow gets mastitis, they have to throw away the milk. It's very expensive for the farmers. So I worked on pharmaceuticals, but the difficulty with pharmaceuticals is that they have to be stable on the shelf. Like if you go to Walgreens or CVS, it could be that that drug has been on the shelf for a year, and you want to make sure that that drug is 100% or 99% potent, and it can degrade a little bit. But in order to prove that the drug is stable for 2 years on the shelf, guess how long the experiment takes? 2 years. And then you have to do a duplicate and triplicate. It's not very exciting, folks. And if you like dealing with people, I mean, you know, think of me doing this, talking to test tubes. It's like really boring. There was a disturbance in the force. You all know about shadow IT, right? Anybody not know what shadow IT is? It's the person you go to that knows how to do pivot tables, or they know how to spin up a web page 20 years ago. So there was shadow IT. Large corporations, historically, about every 5 to 10 years, decide that shadow IT is evil. We need to consolidate it, bring it into corporate. And so there's a corporate IT, which then starts the cycle over again, because the people in the business don't feel like they're being served, and so they develop shadow IT. So Pfizer went through this process. They pulled everybody in, and they needed essentially sales managers or account managers to be on the interface between corporate IT and the various businesses. Pfizer has 3 main businesses. There's R&D, sales and marketing, and everything else, which was HR, legal, all that kind of stuff. And I could spell R&D, I could spell IT. So I got the job of being the account manager between IT and R&D. I started as a scientist. I could speak IT. The first thing we did was one of the big four firms had come to Pfizer and said, hey, your support costs are too high. We could fix that for you. Take away admin privileges from 40% of your population. And senior management bought in. I mean, it was Arthur Anderson or whatever they were back then. They paid the money, said this is great. So they started a project. I'm curious, if you were given the project of take away admin privileges from 40% of the people, I mean, ignore the fact that people are just generally going to be pissed off at losing things. What's the problem with 40% of people not having admin privileges? Anybody? Well, maybe, but let's say that it's bingo, right? And they're going to be, if you have 40% of the people don't have admin privileges, think you got a meeting of 10 people, randomly distributed. 6 of those people are going to have admin privileges. The other 4 are going to say, hey, why does he have admin privileges? It's not going to work. So I only took the job if they said we could take away admin privileges from 90% of the people and add a customer satisfaction measure. I figured if we're going to take privileges away from people, neutral is, they can be we expect them to be a little bit pissed off, right? So I had them tell me, we set a goal jointly, that 85% of the people or more would say it doesn't suck, right? So neutral is positive, and we hit that. And think about that, that's a security thing, right? That's changing culture, and I ended up making friends with the IT department. They were not friends with business back then. I remember showing up we had to go to Sandwich, England, which is a major facility for Pfizer. It's a cool facility to go. You should go if you ever get a chance, because you drive past the big airport that was used for the bombers in World War II. It's out in the middle of the country, but it's a huge, huge runway. So I went to Sandwich, and I introduced my IT partner as my IT partner. And he almost lost it, dropped his jaw on the floor because they'd never been called friends. So that's how I got started in cybersecurity. I worked at Pfizer. I got laid off in 2005 because Pfizer downsized. They took over too many companies. So I got laid off. I took my retraining allowance. I had worked there for 20-some years, so I did get a retraining allowance. I took that and put it all into work study with SANS. Everybody's heard of SANS, right? Work study at that time was $500. You go a day early. You had to stay in the conference hotel, but it ended up being about between $2,000 and $3,000 per class, and you got the cert and everything. So using my retraining allowance, I managed to get several certs, and I made myself useful at SANS. I would go to the conferences and stay late. As work study, you really work your butt off. Has anybody done work study for SANS? No? Okay, it's a lot more expensive now. I think it's $3,000 or $3,500. Oh, okay. $7,500 for work study? Yeah, the classes are also expensive. They were about $5,000 when work study was $500. So it's really expensive to get SANS training, and I have something like a dozen certs. Like I said, the advice I have for you is not going to work. You got to find something else. But there's other ways to do this. So I got very involved at SANS. That got me a job teaching at Purdue, in Purdue Calumet. At the time, they were trying to build a computer security program, and they needed people with PhDs. My PhD is in chemical engineering. It doesn't have anything to do with cybersecurity, but I know some cybersecurity. By that time, I had SANS certs and I had a CISSP. So, you kind of wend your way through the world. I got noticed because I was tweeting, of all things. There was a guy that the professor at Purdue knows my tweets, said, hey, come interview. It was a terrible job. It was two hours from my house. And so I would drive over and sleep in the Red Roof Inn for the week and then go back. I did that for 2 years and just couldn't take it anymore. But fortunately, a guy named Stephen Northcutt, who was at the time president of SANS, said, hey, I have always wanted to to run a graduate program, and they're going to let me do it. Would you come help me because you have a PhD? And so I said, Stephen Northcutt calls the president of SANS. You don't say no. So I went and I did there for a couple of years, and we spun up. Anybody have a master's from SANS here? Every once in a while, I get somebody that's just joined the program. So I did that. Then they got accreditation. You don't need high-powered people if you're at accreditation. If you get accredited, you're already famous. So nobody, if you're thinking of going to SANS now, you're not asking are they accredited and who's there, right? So they're accredited. I left. I was looking for something to do. There was this idea of a bunch of cyber civilians in Michigan, and so that's how I got into the cyber civilian corps. That's my background, which is like not starting off in cybersecurity. So among the signs that you may see when you think you're wired for a cybersecurity career is this one, and you should pay attention to that one too. But that's how it started. I saw this slide, and this just really expresses my feeling these days. I am a dancer, and well, my heart's been broken. Like, if your heart's not been broken, let me help you out with that. That's what makes you alive. But there is supply chain and social infrastructure collapse, right? I mean, look at us. We're all in masks. Even having a mask on does make you kind of recoil from people a little bit. This is scary times. And I got Stuff's on Fire. You heard of I Am the Cavalry, Woods and Josh Corman? I did a talk at B-Sides Las Vegas this year, and there was a track called the I Am the Cavalry track that was at B-Sides Las Vegas, and this was one of the themes, that stuff is on fire. So I think this is really where I am, is like I have all this stuff, and I'm at a certain age where I'm thinking about, what's the rest of my life going to be like? This is it. I don't have a gas mask on. I don't think we need those. But if that is the case, how are we going to react? And I'll just tell you up front, Mr. Rogers is one of my heroes, so no making fun. Mr. Rogers is a badass. Whether you've seen the movie or not, I have not, but I know because I'm a member, and an active member, but an ordained elder in the Presbyterian Church. And Mr. Rogers was a Presbyterian minister. He got to be a Presbyterian. I don't care what you think about religion. But in the Presbyterian Church, you have to define a group of people that call you, right? Mr. Rogers, the Grand Presbyterian Church, was convinced by Mr. Rogers that children are a particular group of people that needs a certain way of addressing them. I really want to stay out of the religion part of it. But he identified a target group, got a large organization to fund him, to support him to do this. And so that's really why he's my hero. He made it happen. And he didn't beat anybody up. Mr. Rogers is like the nicest guy. So if you can make it happen by doing this, it's great. So we look around, we see the helpers. We help the helpers. We are not the helpers. The helpers are police, fire, government, that kind of thing. We help them and support public infrastructure. So in Michigan, who needs help? In Michigan, there's 2,500 public entities. We only deal with public services, okay? Commercial services, security is part of doing business. So, if you screw up, sorry. But there's 2,500 local public entities, including cities, counties, townships, and school districts, because school districts are sometimes organized differently. They're a special population, and I like Mr. Rogers, and he was about kids, so I think about this. Healthcare shows up too, but healthcare tends to be commercial. So we have 2,500 public entities. Do you think there are 2,500 IT professionals to support IT departments in 2,500 local entities? I'll tell you, no. We think about 500 of those 2,500 public entities have contracts with a managed service provider, managed security service provider, managed service security, MSSP. So that leaves 2,000 of them that are uncovered, as it were. There's another phrase from Josh, target rich, cyber poor. This is a graph of the population of Michigan counties by population, and you can see over on the left is Wayne and Macomb, this Detroit area. There's Flint, Lansing. These are, you don't even live in Michigan in most of these cities you've heard of, right? But you could probably name a half dozen. That's all the ones on the left. I hope you can name Kalamazoo now, because Kalamazoo rocks. But you see this long tail. The people managing the IT departments out here on the right, you know, that's the kid that was the best in the math class in high school, you know, and he comes in and he gets hired to spin up the website, probably got hired to spin up the website 20 years ago for the city government. And that's not making fun of any, bless their hearts, you know, for doing that. We've been in organizations where they've been breached and people are still coming to the IT person asking about password changes. So back in 2010, which was where when Governor Rick Snyder was elected, and I know if you know Governor Snyder, it's for something else, so just forget about that, because his Twitter handle is One Tough Nerd. He did a good thing for Michigan. I'm really happy he did this. He came up with the idea of having a bunch of civilians who could supplement state resources in the event of a cyber emergency. So there was a bunch of, and it was true, I think it was 4 or 5 old white guys got together and they had this tech idea, but that's all there was. I mean, yeah, those were the people. They did something good, okay? The things that were in people's heads at that time, 2001 was the 9/11 attack. You all were alive back then. I remember what it was like. It was like a huge gut punch that lasted about a year. It was a terrible awakening. We knew that the United States was vulnerable, and you started looking around for everything. It was really an awakening to how vulnerable we are. In 2003, you might not remember this. I remember it because I was at Cedar Point with a bunch of high school kids, but the power went out all along the northeastern seaboard. And if you were at Cedar Point, it meant the roller coaster stopped at the very top of the hill, and people had to walk down, and they were sobbing and crying. It made a big emotional impression. Turned out this was a squirrel, but you know, it really doesn't matter, because if you lose electricity, hospitals can't do surgery, you know, all of those things. So it was just a reinforcement that we are vulnerable. In 2007, this was on purpose. The Department of Energy dragged an electrical generator to Idaho, sent it a series of computer commands, and made it blow up. And if you have not seen this, you should go find it on YouTube. It's pretty cool. The generator just starts spinning faster and faster. It starts smoking. And it takes years to replace the generator. So you do that with a couple of generators, you're in big, deep doo-doo. And in Michigan, we have the Upper Peninsula. If you ever see anybody do the Michigan map, you know, we have the Upper Peninsula up here, which is it's cold up there. I was just up there last week, and it's not very populated. And in Michigan, the governor declares a cyber emergency when life is at stake. People at life and limb are at stake. So the original goal of the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps was to respond when the governor declares a cyber emergency, which means people are in danger of dying. That would be electrical, you know, the electrical power going out, right? They also recognized that we had trainable workforce. Google has some stuff there. And, you know, the auto industry was not going great guns, and we needed something to do with all the technical expertise. We got University of Michigan, so how to use these resources. We had Merit was one of the original providers of the internet in North America. I'm pretty sure, I don't know this for sure, but knowing about Merit now, I'm pretty sure that Merit probably provided that internet service when I was back at Purdue, because they were, okay, excellent. How do you, would you, okay, there you go. And so you know they provided at Purdue also? Okay, cool. So I know that Merit was part of the NANOG, the North American Network Operating Group. Yeah. So they were, the thing that was happening was the NANOG, internet was commodity. There was a guy from the Defense University in Washington, D.C. named Joe Adams that was from Michigan. So they hired Joe. He was one of the group of old white guys. He wasn't that old, but So they created a cyber range at Merritt. They were going to take the not quite well enough trained people within Michigan, run them through the cyber range, train them up to be responders. And then we would have a cadre of cyber responders within Michigan. Unfortunately, a couple of things. Training people for an event where people are in danger of dying, it's kind of hard to imagine the cyber component of that. Like, what kind of packets do you analyze? I just couldn't figure out how we would do that. You want to train for your mission. I make fun of it, but like really, when you get down to brass tacks and you want to organize your group and you have a goal, if your goal is responding to keep people from dying, I don't know how to do that with cyber. But there are other things we can do. We also knew, like, there were a handful of us that became members of the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps when it was run by Merritt. And the way you became a member back then was they did an interview. And you had to have connections. And, like, I was a dean at SANS, so it was pretty easy. So I became a member, but there were some of us that already had multiple SANS certifications. And they were just talking about at Merritt Cyber Range, they were talking about, like, Global Horizons, New Horizons, those kind of level, maybe CI, maybe Sec Plus training. So it wasn't as good as we wanted. And also, as we did some early response, locals are not prepared at all. Particularly when COVID happened, how many of us are surprised that there was RDP open to the internet? It was a freaking mess. So in theory, practice is in the same theory, but once we tried to turn the theory into practice, it didn't work. We're seeing a lot more stuff like this. There's a college that's closed down. Ransomware is all the big thing now. It's not attacking the power grid, though that does happen. But even on, for those of you, if you're in cybersecurity, you listen to something, the CyberWire, Security Now, one of the podcasts, and this is what they're saying, that ransomware is sort of tailing off a little bit now, but still we have some work to do. So looking at the thought process, there's a lot of things to do. There's response. I mean, the NIST prepare, what's PICRL? Prepare, identify, contain, eradicate, remediate, and lessons learned. NIST is very similar, 4 or 5, 6-step process. So we decided that the first thing you want to do is respond, right? If you get whacked, you got to have a response prepared. So we collaborated with Merritt. This was back in 2013. We created the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps. I became a member in 2015. We got lucky in 2015 because one of those overqualified members was also the deputy chief security officer for one of the power companies in Michigan, and one of the old white guys. When the governor changes, every 4 years, the high-level people leave because they've been like the CIO of a state, and then they can go to a consulting company and make lots of money. So you then get the next crop of very senior staff, but then it's like, what's that British show? Yes, Minister. The technocrats were always there. I'll always be there. But we lost the CTO. So we got seconded the CSO from a power company, and he was cool. And I don't know where he got money to fund SANS training, but we did our first SANS training that year. And they tell me that RFP is still floating out there. But so I don't know, it's the vagaries of the procurement process, but we got SANS training. And that really turned the corner on the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps because it made it a thing. Christian went off back to the power company, and I took over as the project manager at that point. We have now the Michigan Cyber Civilian Act, which is like, I don't read much legislation, but I had to read this in great detail because we have law, we're subject to the oversight committee of the legislature, and I know way too much about legislation now. But it's a really good law. It's only about 3 pages. The first page is definitions. And in the amendment in 2019, we got the government defined an incident to include the existence of a vulnerability. Governments are great because legislatures are great. They can define things. You may remember when Australia wanted to redefine pi to be 3.14, I think, and that they didn't let them do that, but they did since this is not math, the legislature is able to define an incident to include the existence of a vulnerability. And if you follow CISA, you know CISA has a catalog of known exploited vulnerabilities. So we have not done this yet. We just have the ability to do it. But now we could take the exploited vulnerability catalog, work with our local governments to see who needs fixing, and go out and begin to do that. So that's our next, proactive activities are our next goal. Right now, we are just a response organization. We currently have 64 MIC3 members, and most of them have a certification that is covered under DoD 8570, which I think is 8410 now, but it is the legislation that says you can work on a cyber project for the U.S. government. We have, I don't really care about this, but we have to hook up to other people's licensing and accreditation and validation programs because I don't want to write accreditation. So benefits, obviously there's training. And we have people that work for small companies that would never send them to SANS training. And we don't do, I'm not guaranteeing that we're going to do SANS training again. I think SANS training is overpriced. And I also know for a fact that there's training out there now that is more cost effective. Employers, like for a small business, if they have a member and that member goes off to receive SANS training or Black Hills training or whatever we're doing at the point, that employer is going to benefit also. So we let the employee go for a little bit, we're going to train them up and send them back. And that adds to the level of cybersecurity within the state. And we're all about, like, you know, if your neighbor is vulnerable, you're vulnerable too. We are included in the state cyber response plan. That's our cyber disruption response plan, which you can find on the internet. Probably other states have theirs too. There's some parts that are confidential, but we're in there. We do tabletop exercises. We have helped to show the state that they need to do a little bit more work because we did a multi-site tabletop recently, and in the State Emergency Ops Center, they were sort of running into each other like the Keystone Cops. And again, I'm not making fun because every state's going to be like that. But if you make people bump into each other, they go, oh, my nose hurts. I better have a plan. So then they start paying attention. We have a much better plan now. We hope we're going to be able to participate with Cyber Shield this year, the National Guard exercise with 50 teams. Our training history, we started off with Security 504, and I put the SANS numbers up here. I'll tell you what they are. But SANS Security 504 is sort of the basic incident response process. If we're going to do incident response, that's where I got the pick or all, prevent, identify, contain, eradicate, remediate, lessons learned. So 504 is sort of the basic incident response training from SANS. We did 510, which is continuous monitoring. So if you're going to go in and look at a network, you kind of want to know what's normal because you have to be able to identify what's abnormal. And taking a course doesn't tell you what's normal on a network, but it tells you where to go to look for what is normal. And I wish it were the case that if you had 510 training, you can come into a local government and say, hi, tell me about these 5 aspects, and the person there is going to tell you, and they're going to most likely say, I don't. But if we know what to look for, we can come and look. We then did do network forensics. If you've ever used what is this, soft elk? There's an elk stack that Phil Hagan has put together for the network forensics class. Highly recommend this class. It really, I went through training and got really interested in endpoint forensics, but network forensics is where it's at. You can solve a problem a lot faster with network forensics. By the time you got a disk image, you can have information from the logs. So we don't do a lot of endpoint forensics, but I do have members that really want to do that. And I'll speak from, I spent several days over in Wisconsin. Wisconsin has an incident response team too. And they have the same issue. They have a large number of people and a small minority want to do memory forensics because it's cool, but it doesn't really help incident response. So I said earlier that one of the benefits we provide for citizens and employers is training. And I don't want to restrict that to things that we use, that we must use, like I want to leave room for some esoteric advanced stuff, but I'm not quite sure what to do with endpoint forensics yet. We did, when we wanted to take a break from SANS, the 4th year we did security onion training. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. You may not be familiar with Chris Sanders' investigative theory class. If you're not familiar with Chris Sanders, he's like one of the wisest people in information security. Seriously. Go to chrissanders.org. He just got his doctorate, but it's in education. And Chris wrote advanced packet analysis. I mean, he's a cyber guy, for sure, but he got his degree in education because he studied about how SOC analysts make decisions. And we did this investigative theory class. It was really excellent. We went through scenarios, and you saw how we are all tempted to jump to conclusions and go down an unproductive path for too long. Highly recommend this class. I think you can take it online now. We are currently using a company called Rangeforce. And again, I tell them, I'm a contractor, so I cannot speak for the state of Michigan, but I'll just tell you personally, I like the Rangeforce platform a lot. It does not have the rock stars like SANS has had. You know, it's not in-person training, it's read the stuff. But they do a really good job at spinning up virtual machines. And so you can read about something, do an exercise, and get immediate feedback. I like it a lot, and it's reasonably priced. So along with Black Hills Information Security and Anti-Siphon as their training piece now, I just think there's nothing against SANS, but I don't want to give somebody my money if I don't have to. So this is the training we've done. We're sticking with Rangeforce for right now. Rangeforce has the ability to do challenges. So about 3 weeks ago, I got 3 teams of people together. They studied some modules around FortiOS and Splunk. So then we had a scenario where we had to respond in the course of a couple of hours and find out what was going on. It was a battle thing. But it's that was a great exercise. Plus, it got everybody together in the same room for the first time in 2 years. It's awesome. Additional benefits, I talk to my members at least once a year to have a one-on-one. That's not very much, but as I do that, 85% of our members have changed jobs in the last 2 years. And I know that's because they know more people. We have a group now, so they can talk to each other. If somebody needs a job, they tell each other. We have a Slack channel, and the jobs channel is pretty busy. We do K through 12 involvement. Merit used to run a high school cyber challenge. They're not going to do it again after this year. But there are other competitions that are out there. And I do try to get members, like we have members all through of all ages, very diverse, well, not as diverse gender and race as I'd like, but we have people at all phases of life. Sometimes, you know, the kids, they got soccer, and so people can't respond for a while. I did have one person that got diagnosed with cancer and is out with chemo for a while. So it's like life. But as we get people involved in the cyber core, they take their cybersecurity training back into their regular life. And so we actually have an effect in high schools and K-12. We have civic involvement. I just had one of my members, just while I was up preparing for this, sent a picture of, or posted a picture on LinkedIn of himself in his reserve deputy's uniform, because he works with his local law enforcement. We have adjunct professors. I think the same guy is actually an adjunct professor. You get people who are overachievers and then the people that are busy, but you know, diversity is wonderful. We have a DHS grant in Michigan to do some education for county clerks, and we put together a contract with a marketing company. So they have some posters that we're going to send out to county clerks. And if I can get my members to show up, we don't currently have badges. That's another thing I have members asking for, you know, polo shirts or something. If I could get badges, I would have some of our members have badges and go stand with representatives talking about elections being secure. But anything that will increase trust in the government, in institutions, I think is a good thing. Our main goal is to deal with cyber threats, but cyber threats are built on top of threats to the underlying infrastructure. So we have to address that as well. If you want to be a member, now that you're all excited, you have to have 2 years of infosec, 1 foundational security certification, some demonstrated knowledge, and we do have some tests. I don't like them very much, and I want to move away from them, but they work, and they gave us the group that we have today. We asked for 10 days of possible participation, but that includes about 6 of training. And I don't think we've ever actually had 10 days of administrative stuff. That doesn't include deployments. We've had probably a double handful of deployments. I'll tell you a little bit about those. And, oh, damn pop-ups. And you have to have a federal background check, an FBI criminal background check, because the law says that. I don't think it's really necessary, but it's theoretically possible that somebody responding to a breach of a local government could be exposed to the Criminal Justice Information System, or CJIS. And they didn't want convicted felons having access to CJIS. So the one thing that we did get changed when we got our law amended was, say, the background check. Here's the story. You know, when the governor signs a bill into law, they always have a bunch of people standing behind, right? And the governor, well, if you're the president, you hold up the signature, but the governor just signed the Michigan Cyber Civilian Act. Oh, sure, yeah. And then, you know, they reach around and hand the pen to somebody. We could only get one person, one member there to sit with the governor when he signed the bill. So that guy took the pen, went home, you know, was very happy. We started implementing the law, did federal background checks. Guess who failed? That guy. Federal background check will pick up youthful offender. So if you're like, I don't know the details of the federal youthful offender program, but it happens. You know, people make mistakes, and so they'll tell you your record will be expunged. Well, you know, it's expunged, but it still shows up. So we got, actually, I don't really want to say his name, but we have his amendment to our law, because we now have advisors. If you don't pass the federal background check, you can appeal to our advisory board, and you can be an advisor. So I made it up to him. We got an amendment. I don't have, can you give me, what? No signal. That's weird. Okay, well, I'll just tell you then. You have to do the federal background check. In order to apply to be a member, you go to our website. You create a My Login. In Michigan, everything starts with MI, so it's pronounced My, so it's your login. You access the MIC3 app. You take some tests. We have these 3 types of tests, 5 tests total. If you pass network forensics, network fundamentals, you get access to the other 2, and then you have to pass 4 of the 5 tests. Once you do that, you submit your NDA, or you sign an NDA, and do the fingerprint authorization. We do that last, because we don't want to do fingerprints on somebody that doesn't have certifications and experience. The activities we do, we have monthly update meetings, and now I'm going to start giving CPEs for that. Training, we do range force. We have face-to-face meetings as often as we can. I hope that some of you will come to GERCON. Does everybody know about GERCON? In Grand Rapids, it is a bit larger than CircleCityCon. Anytime you see like if DerbyCon comes back, if it's a Midwest con, go please. So operations, the way we get deployed, a victim organization will call 1-877-MI-CYBER. They see something, they say something, they call that number. One of the members of the Michigan Cyber Command, which is part of the Michigan State Police, law enforcement, will evaluate the issue. And sometimes they take care of everything. I hope we can change that. That's not the way it is in Wisconsin, but I hope we can get involved earlier. And if they need civilian help, we do a 3-way handshake with Attorney General approved documentation, and it's a pain in the butt, but we can be deployed. Response targets are like this, similar to a small and medium business. We have, you know, generally, this is not a description of anything. This is to give you an idea of size. Lots of external connections. Also, local government will have connections for friend of the court. the criminal justice, lots of other things. I'm going to blow through this. That's all reactive. I have a partner in the government, Andy Brush, who used to be a local, I used to be a computer security guy, and I created a bunch of group for hackers, because that's what I like to do. I love hackers. So I created a group to laugh at my jokes, essentially. And Andy used to be a local government IT official. He used to work for Ann Arbor, which is where University of Michigan is, big city. So he was a local IT government guy. He now works for the state, helping local IT government people prevent attacks. This is the Cyber Partners meeting. You can see where people come from. We even got some people from Wisconsin, Indianapolis. This is the Indiana ISAC has been talking to us about forming an Indiana Cyber Civilian Corps. So you should build a strong team to be cyber secure. This is all the logos. It does not have the MIC3 logo up there. I stole this slide from Andy, and so I'm gonna have to yell at him because he needs my logo. But we have CISA, kind of cheating for putting DHS up there. These are all the folks we work with, FBI, National Guard. Wisconsin has a really good one. I say that because I was just there, and they're the only ones that I have a close relationship with, but I think they're probably the closest to us. And since there are 2 people in FEMA Region 5, I'm pretty sure FEMA Region 5 is Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. And I don't think Illinois has one. Ohio does. They're more with the National Guard. Texas has one. They are not allowed to call them anything that sounds military because the Texas Rangers didn't like that. But they did steal some of our legislation. And my nephew is chief of staff for a Texas legislator. So I've been on the phone with Texas people. I think they'll do something. So we have a half dozen states that are doing something like this. And it's happening. The National Governors Association had us at their Cyber Symposium meeting in Columbus back in June. It had me speaking for the Michigan CISO who couldn't make it, Wisconsin and Ohio. And we had a huge amount of response. I think this kind of idea has some maturity. It's being put into place in other states. And if you, as a cybersecurity person, feel like you can help your community, this is what you want to look for. And as I say, I know there's a guy named Tad Stahl who works in Indiana's Office of Technology. It's a state organization. And I did not tell him before I said his name that I was going to say it, but I did write to him before I came here. And so if we can get something spun up in Indiana, I would love to have Who's Your Hackers, because you've already got a motto, right? So build resilient social infrastructure. This is what I do when I'm not hacking. That is really me. I'm a dancer. And when I worked at Pfizer, so when the vaccines came out, I'm in Kalamazoo, right? And I work for the state, so I am deep state. So I had to go volunteer and do vaccines. But meet people where they are. If you are a cyber person, take your cyberness out into the public. I talk to parents at dance class. They ask me what I do when I'm not dancing, and I tell them, what I do. Same way with vaccination. I talked to thousands of people when they came through to get their vaccines. So they heard the word cyber. Whether it did good, I don't know. But we have to do focused stuff and the general stuff. That's what I have. Any questions, additions? Yes, sir. I've been around. So a year ago, if you'd said that, I would have told you reasons why we can't do that, and I can still think of those reasons. However, it's a good idea. It really is. Challenges, and one of the challenges we have in responding is that local entities are independent. And so we could set up, like the state could set up a bug bounty program, and the state does get reports of vulnerabilities, and I don't think we pay money, but I don't know. Oh, well, if it's elections, that might be different. Right. Yes. So you're thinking in the right place. There's not a good packaged answer for that, but that is the kind of thinking that we're all doing. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, NOFO just came out, so we're going to be writing proposals. There's a Homeland Security grant that we're going to try to get some money from. But currently, the staff is me, and I'm half-time. So it's, well, I do have a project coordinator now. But we're working on it. And one thing I'm trying to do is to get people excited. So thank you for being excited. It may not be happening today, but it will. And I put my contact information up here. Ray Davidson on Twitter, you can find me. Yes? I did not see the legislation. I hear that they submitted legislation. I guess it would be in the House. I don't remember how Indiana works, but it didn't pass. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but because it was pretty rushed. But I think it'll come back up. Again, I don't know how the legislation works, but we are, like, I know Wisconsin has a mature program. We're both looking at Indiana to say, hey, you guys are next. So we're gonna do what we can. Because Purdue's here too. Yes. Yes, we do it. In the Michigan State Police, the guy that runs the Cyber Command Center he has a philosophical approach also, that they're not out to be law enforcement, they're out to protect from cyber attacks, and so they don't tell people. And we have Good Samaritan law, we have confidential disclosure, lots of kinds of things within Michigan. So the state police was already poised to do this. Local governments, you're right. I live in Kalamazoo, and it's still a bunch of old white guys. And I'm an old white guy too, but I'm not one of them. One of those old white. Well, I mean, I have long hair. I'm not former law enforcement, so it is. But I know that the thing that I'm very excited about with Wisconsin is that sometimes we believe that if cyber insurance comes in, we can't do anything. Wisconsin has been able to work with cyber insurance so they can cooperate. And so that's why I'm excited about working with them. And I think I'm going to get the hook here. So clap, and I'll talk to you as I come off the stage.